40 here. Probably wondering, 40, what the hell are you doing? Well, I'm sitting in the morning sun, and I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, and then I watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Oh, I'm just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Los Angeles and I headed for the Sydney Bay because I've had nothing to live for and look like nothing's going to come my way. So I'm sitting on the dock of the bay wasting time. Looks like nothing's going to change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Yeah. So I'm just sitting here resting my bones in this loneliness. It won't leave me alone. It's 2,000 miles plus 10,000 miles I roamed just to make this dock my home. So I'm just, oh man, now I'm wet. So now I'm just going to sit at the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away, sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Okay, have you heard about the Sam Bankman-Fried FTX scandal? And where have you heard about the names Bankman and Fried? Remember I did a big interview with Rony Guldmann, who wrote a memoir about the Stanford Law Star Chamber, and he talked about the duplicitous dealings he received from Stanford Law professors Barbara Fried and Joe Bankman. Well, you'd never guess who their son is. It's Sam Bankman-Fried. He is the child of these two eminent Stanford Law professors. So let's go to the news, Associated Press. Come on, guys, I'm trying to do a podcast here. Stop getting me wet. The downfall of FTX's Sam Bankman-Fried sends shockwaves through the crypto world. New York, Sam Bankman-Fried received numerous plaudits as he rapidly achieved superstar status as the head of cryptocurrency exchange FTX. He was the savior of crypto, the newest force in democratic politics, and potentially the world's first trillionaire. Now the comments about the 30-year-old Bankman-Fried range from bemused to hostile after FTX filed for bankruptcy protection Friday, leaving his investors and customers feeling duped, many others in the crypto world fearing the repercussions. Bankman-Fried himself could face civil or criminal charges. And we have Jeremy Allaire, co-founder and CEO of cryptocurrency company Circle, says, I've known him for a number of years, and what just happened is shocking. Shocking. Come on, guys, keep the water down. I'm trying to do a podcast. I'm not sure my cheap Aussie phone is waterproof. Under Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX quickly grew to be the third largest exchange by volume. The stunning collapse of this nascent empire has sent tsunami-like waves through the cryptocurrency industry. Now, I turned hard against crypto about 2 years ago. So crypto has seen a fair share of volatility and turmoil this year, including a sharp decline in price for Bitcoin and other digital assets. For some, the events are reminiscent of the domino-like failures of Wall Street firms during the 2008 financial crisis, particularly now that supposedly healthy firms like FTX are failing. One venture fund wrote down investments in FTX worth over $200 million. Cryptocurrency lender BlockFi paused client withdrawals Friday after FTX sought bankruptcy protection. Singapore-based exchange Crypto.com saw withdrawals increase this weekend for internal reasons. Some of the action could be attributed to raw nerves from FTX. Sam, what have you done? Tweeted Sean Ryan Evans, host of the cryptocurrency Bankless, after the bankruptcy filing. The Sam Bankman-Fried, right, the son of two eminent Stanford Law professors, and his company are under investigation by the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The investigations likely center on the possibility that the firm may have used customers' deposits to fund bets at Bankman-Fried's hedge fund Alameda Research, violation of U.S. securities law. So Patrick Hillman, Chief Strategy Officer at Binance, FTX's biggest competitor, says, this is the direct result of a rogue actor breaking every single basic rule of fiscal responsibility. Early last week, Binance appeared ready to step in to bail out FTX, but backed away after a review of FTX's books. The ultimate impact of FTX's bankruptcy is uncertain. This failure will likely result in the destruction of currencies at a time when the industry could use a vote of confidence. Won't someone provide a vote of confidence for crypto? So Corey Clipston, CEO of Swan Bitcoin, who for months was raising concerns about FTX's business model, says, "I care because it's retail investors who suffer the most." I always thought it was women and minorities who suffer the most. And because too many people still wrongly associate Bitcoin with the scammy crypto space. So Clipston is publicly enthusiastic about Bitcoin, but has long had deep skepticism about other parts of the crypto universe. Bankman-Fried founded FTX in 2019 and grew it rapidly. It was recently valued at $32 billion. The son of Stanford University law professors, who is known to play the video game League of Legends during meetings, Bankman-Fried attracted investments from the highest echelons of Silicon Valley. Sequoia Capital, which over the decades invested in Apple, Cisco, Google, Airbnb, and YouTube, described their meeting with Bankman-Fried as likely talking to the world's first trillionaire. Several of Sequoia's partners became enthusiastic after Bankman-Fried following a Zoom meeting in 2021. Several more meetings, Sequoia decided to invest in the company. I don't know how I know, I just do. Sam Bankman-Fried is a winner, wrote Adam Fisher, a business journalist who wrote a profile of Bankman-Fried for the firm. That article, published in late September, has now been removed from Sequoia's website. Sequoia has written down its $213 million investment to zero. Pension fund in Ontario, Canada, wrote down its investment to zero as well. Till last week, Bankman-Fried was seen as a white knight for the crypto industry. Whenever the crypto industry had one of its crises, Bankman-Fried was the person likely to fly in with a rescue plan. When online trading platform Robinhood was in financial straits earlier this year, collateral damage from the decline in stock and crypto crises, Bankman-Fried jumped in to buy a stake in the company as a sign of support. What a mensch! When Sam Bankman-Fried bought up the assets of bankrupt crypto firm Voya Digital for $1.4 billion this summer, brought a sense of relief to Voyager account holders whose assets have been frozen since its own failure. That rescue, come on guys, I'm trying to run a very respectable podcast here. Please keep the water disruption to a minimum, particularly as my Australian cheap Oppo phone is not waterproof. FTX's failure started after cryptocurrency news outlet CoinDesk published a story based on a leaked balance sheet from Alameda Research. The story found the relationship between FTX and Alameda Research was deeper and more entwined than previously known, including that FTX was lending high-quality quantities of its own token FTT to Alameda to help build up cash, sparked mass withdrawals from FTX, causing the crypto firm to experience a very odd financial problem, a bank run. So FTX created a worthless token out of thin air and used it to make its balance sheet appear more robust than it really was. As king of crypto, Sam Bankman-Fried and his influence was starting to pour into political and popular culture. FTX bought prominent sports sponsorships with Formula One racing. They bought the naming rights to an arena in Miami for the Miami Heat. They ran Super Bowl ads featuring Seinfeld creator Larry David. He pledged to donate $1 billion toward Democrats this election cycle. His actual donations were tens of millions of dollars. Prominent politicians like Bill Clinton were invited to speak at FTX conferences. Football star Tom Brady invested in FTX, as did his supermodel, soon-to-be ex-wife, Gisele Bündchen. Bankman-Fried has been the subject of some criticism before FTX collapse. He was increasingly vocal about the need for more regulation of cryptocurrency. Many supporters of crypto oppose government oversight. Now FTX's collapse may help make the case for stricter regulation. One of those critics was Binance founder and CEO Changpeng Zhao. The feud between the two billionaires spilled out onto Twitter, where Zhao and Bankman-Fried collectively commanded millions of followers. Zhao helped kickstart the withdrawals that doomed FTX when he said Binance would sell its holdings in FTX's crypto token FTT. What a shit show, and it's going to be crypto's fault instead of one guy's fault, Zhao wrote on Twitter on Saturday. Oy vey. Oy vey. So here we have what seems to be a fraud of epic proportions. And the parents of Sam Bankman-Fried are Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried, right? The star antagonists in Rony Guldmann's memoir on the Star Chamber at Stanford Law School. Remember, I interviewed Rony few months ago. There may well be criminal liability here. There's no evidence that Joe Bankman is criminally liable, but he was deeply involved with FTX, right? Certainly possibly he was deeply involved with FTX. What exactly constitutes deeply? He's one of the leading authorities in financial regulation and tax law. At a minimum, his involvement will be considered highly embarrassing and discrediting and a pox upon Stanford law. So Sam Bankman-Fried donated tens of millions of dollars to Democratic causes and candidates. Some of this went through a Bay Area PAC, Mind the Gap. Who started Mind the Gap? His mom, Barbara Fried. Fox described Mind the Gap as a secretive group led by Stanford University academics. So the PAC's raison d'etre is stealth, just like liberalism. Liberalism does not claim to be another partisan ideology, it claims to be the transcendence of ideologies. It is just pragmatic and freedom-loving and tolerant and kind. So this all coheres pretty well with Rony Guldmann's memoir and his struggle against the liberal elites. So maybe Joe Bankman and his wife Barbara Fried are capable of exactly what Rony Guldmann attributes to them in his memoir. Now, you may not remember my stunning interview with Rony Guldmann. It was the interview that, honestly, it set the internet on fire. And I would love to play it for you. Who can remember where they were when they first saw this?
G'day mate, Porty here, going academic today. I just read a very compelling new book called The Star Chamber of Stanford on the Secret Trial and Invisible Persecution of a Stanford Law Fellow. The author is Rony Guldmann. Rony, where did you write this book?
Where did I write it? I wrote it in various places. Its very beginnings were actually during the time related, though that was still inchoate. But after my fate was sealed at Stanford, I was in Israel for a few years. I've connections there, and I was considering living there, and I certainly developed its foundations as well. And then the rest, since then, I was also working on the companion volumes, like Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression, as I know, which is actually significantly longer than the published memoir, and I had to do that as well. So I think there were a number of years where I didn't work on the book at all. I was just working on the theoretical stuff. But once that was in good enough shape, I turned my attention fully to the book. I would say probably since maybe fall 2017, I was doing that exclusively from a writing point of view, and I just and that was done here in New York. I moved back to New York around 2013. So I guess I gave you both the where and the when.
Yeah, and I'm going to encourage you to look at your cam a little bit more.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, is it good now?
Yeah, that's so.
Sure.
So
Right.
get the full.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing the microphone, but it is designed to catch my voice. So
Yeah, and so tell me, why did you write the book?
well, I think I'm going to give you an answer. I mean, we probably conceptualize the answer on a number of levels. So let me start with one that's consistent with the introduction of the book. I start off by quoting that paragraph from Rousseau's Discourse on Arts and Sciences, the origin of intellectual life and intellectual achievement originates in our vices and not our virtues, and pride being foremost among those vices. And I think that's certainly true on some level, because at the time at Stanford, I was committed hell or high water to this.
So if only people had read this book, the Star Chamber at Stanford Law School, all right, billions of dollars may have been saved, right? People would have realized that maybe something fishy and dishonest was going on. If they had just seen the deviousness with which Rony Guldmann had to do battle at Stanford Law School, this whole FTX fiasco may have been avoided, and thousands of lives would have been spared tremendous suffering. If only they'd been tuning in to the 40 show. Right here at the 40 show, we're not afraid to peer into the abyss of liberalism. We're not afraid to do battle with the dominant ethos of our time. We're not afraid to take on the dominant institutions and power centers and ideologies that rule our world. Right? And it's a shame more people weren't watching the 40 show. They could have been alerted to this FTX breakdown years ahead of time. Think of all the suffering, the distress, the dislocation. Oh no, here comes a wave. I'm going to get it now. Oh, okay. Oy vey. Okay, let's batten down the hatches. I'm just trying to run a very high quality podcast here. And bloody Sydney Harbour. No, stop. No. I'm trying to reveal the iniquity and perfidy and the violence and the microaggressions and the macroaggressions inherent in our system of liberal hegemony. And kind of bloke get an even break here. All right, so Rony Guldmann, all right, he warned us about this
research project, which I was hoping would open some doors to an academic career for reasons I described throughout the memo. It didn't, but I think I was too proud to surrender to fate. So yes, all of the usual avenues for communicating my ideas, had been cut off. Obviously I could, post stuff on academia or SSRN or.
So why were they cut off? Because the liberal left controls the cultural means of production. And so the rest of us, have to live outside the pale. Like here I am outside the pale, sitting on the dock of the bay. All right. The liberals control the high grounds of culture. They control the cultural means of production. I'm reduced to my tiny little YouTube channels and my tiny little Odyssey and Rumble channels. But I've been trying to warn people about crypto and the deviousness inherent in the system of liberal hegemony as manifested at Stanford University. How long have I been quoting Rony Guldmann? Right, for 6 months I keep referencing his book, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression. I've done more than anyone to say that the liberal emperor is naked, but they wouldn't listen to me.
Or whatnot, but that's not going to get anyone's attention. So I realized that I would not surrender to fate. So how to proceed? Well, I write. This is the story of a term paper that came to life. The term paper that was first written for Stanford before it had to become about Stanford. And it had to become about Stanford because that was the only way of resuscitating my research agenda by tying me in some way to the prestige of that institution, which I had to some extent just by virtue of having studied there and had the fellowship, but I would have to do so.
So I too have been inside the walls of hallowed academia. I was a student at UCLA. My father did 2 PhDs at the prestigious Michigan State University and the prestigious University of Manchester. So I've been inside these hallowed halls, and yet I have emerged outside to tell you the truth about what's really going on here.
To take that to a different level in order to actually disseminate my ideas. So it was pride and necessity.
Tell me a little bit about your ancestors and your parents.
So it's a convoluted story, and I can't fill in all the gaps, even though I've asked about it. So I was.
Okay, we're going to fast forward there. Get back to the good stuff.
So much, I understand that, of course, if you've got a historically oppressed group, that group identity is going to be more inevitably salient to them, and so I know it's kind of facile just to say, just be colorblind. So I wouldn't want to urge that in a facile way. But on the other hand, I wouldn't want to discount it as an ideal altogether, and which the diversity movement certainly risks doing.
Okay, there are hundreds of law schools in the United States. What sets Stanford Law School apart?
Well, in a sense, and this is something that I address in the preface. Anything that sets it apart in my experience, and I don't want to speak outside of that experience. So, today, if somebody were to ask me, I could go to Harvard, or I could go to Stanford, what do you think? I would be in no position to say, well, Stanford has clinics ABC, and I think that's cutting edge and innovative. That may well be the case. It's probably the case, but that's not something I know. I can speak to personally. So I can only address that from the point of view of my experience as related in the memoir, and in connection with that, I would say that in terms of the underlying target of my critique, which are the cultural pathologies of academia, nothing sets it apart as far as I can.
So did the cultural pathologies of academia predispose Sam Bankman-Fried to his nefarious activities with FTX? Did he inherit cultural pathologies from his Stanford Law School professors? And did he subsidize these cultural pathologies by donating tens of millions of dollars to Democrats?
There is a common academic ethos which is going to pervade different institutions. The fact that they are geographically separate is going to have minimal or no effect on that. So from the point of view of my negative critique, I say, nothing sets it apart, though it is set apart in my experience given my...
So I think Stanford Law School would be regarded as one of the top 5 law schools in the United States.
The nature of my allegations, and I tried to frame that in a positive way, which is this is the place where my thesis came to life, where the higher truth of conservative claims of cultural oppression was articulated three-dimensionally and autobiographically, and certainly, notwithstanding the antagonism, you have to give credit to anyone who can help bring that about, which the memoir does.
How would you describe your politics? For example, I could describe my own as paleo-conservative. How would you describe yours?
As far as if you were going, as I say in the book, if you were going to go down a checklist of issues, I would be, by and large, on the liberal side. I have my worldview is, maybe it's not really scientific, but it's scientific. So, for example, I have a hard time believing that a 3-week-old fetus has any quality that's worthy of moral regard. If you had a more metaphysical, you might see things.
So yeah, a traditionalist thinks that a 3-week-old fetus does have tremendous moral worth, because it doesn't just see the fetus in a buffered, individual one-off sense. It sees it as a proto-human, right? It sees human life, on a trajectory, on a path. So the liberal worldview is buffered, strategic, autonomous, believing itself capable of rationality and with natural predispositions towards that which is good. The traditionalist worldview is that people have natural predispositions that are probably stronger towards that which is bad, that they are not buffered, but they are porous, right? And what goes on outside of us influences us, and that we're not just who we are at a particular snapshot in time. We are part of a tribe, a process, things larger than ourselves. We are porous, meaning things come into us in our lives that affect us, and what's going on with you affects me.
Differently, as far as economics, there I have really very little truck with with conservatives. I mean, certainly, government regulation can go too far in certain instances.
So this is Rony Guldmann, the author of the Stanford Law Star Chamber, who I interviewed on my website 6 months ago, and I haven't stopped talking about his book, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression, and I probably brought it up 30 times on my show about the pathologies of our reigning liberal left hegemony. And the two principal antagonists of his book on Stanford Law School are the parents of Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy who gave us the multi-billion-dollar FTX scam and crypto meltdown.
Disputing that, I would say, for example, in France, where it's almost impossible to fire somebody without going to court and justifying it rigorously. That's not a good thing. But the idea that if we have some form of universal health care or universal health insurance, and somehow that is the the road to serfdom, or that we're going to lose the virtue of self-reliance, that I find kind of absurd. I know that, and I think.
And we would be up to have that. The United States would have national health insurance. One, there's a unitary rather than a federal system. And two, if it didn't have an enormous underclass, it was going to suck up most of those health dollars. And if we didn't increasingly realize that our government and our health system is going to actively discriminate against white people in favor of its favorite pet groups, right? So the vaccine was to be rolled out in a racially discriminatory way, racially discriminatory against white people. So once we saw how our federal bureaucracies and state bureaucracies and local bureaucracies wanted to roll out COVID vaccines in a racially discriminatory way against white people, why then would white people want to fund national health insurance, which would be disproportionately used by minorities?
Probably paleoconservatives might share that sentiment as well. As civilization has developed, we have to do fewer things for ourselves. Yeah, it used to be if your farmhouse is burning, you've got to put it out. There's no fire department. If somebody steals someone from you, very likely you're on your own, or your clan is.
So this is Rony Guldmann, author of Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression, and he's just making the point that he is, generally speaking, on the left, that he produced the most powerful critique of the liberal hegemony that dominates the cultural means of production that I've read.
On your own. So the whole process of modernity is actually relieving individuals of individual responsibilities for certain things so they can turn their attention to other things. And I think something like guaranteed health care and some level of the welfare state generally is basically just a rational extension of that.
Mm-hmm. And would you attend a same-sex wedding?
Yeah.
And do you feel any internal revulsion towards same-sex marriage?
No. I mean, it's like, it's obviously, since, to the extent if you're heterosexual, yeah, you may find the idea,
okay, so we've established he's a man.
Long time ago, back in grad school at Indiana, he actually he didn't necessarily feel like that way at first, but he was kind of a bit of a lost soul as well. Abused as a kid, and he was for a while considering.
Okay, let's get the context here.
Had a strong internal revolt.
Any kind of moral judgment.
And what about, let's say you had a friend who you discovered had just a really strong internal revulsion towards same-sex marriage, couldn't even articulate a good argument against it, just had a strong internal revulsion against it, and on that basis would not attend one. What would your reaction to such a person be?
Well, I've had such a friend, and it was a long time ago, back in grad school at Indiana. He actually he didn't necessarily feel like that way at first, but he was kind of a bit of a lost soul as well. Abused as a kid, and he was for a while considering.
Let's fast forward here.
thrilled that those added and forays, and believe I'm not repelled by repulsion by homosexuality. I disagree, but they're real.
Reputation.
Oh, I think it's my reflexes.
Got it. What is Stanford Law School's reputation among elite American legal scholars?
Say that again.
What is Stanford Law's reputation?
Oh, I think it's certainly in the very top. I would imagine the top 3 or 4. U.S. News and World Report is usually ranked number 2 or 3, behind Yale or behind Yale and Stanford. Now that is kind of a crude measure, and certainly most legal scholars would, reject that as amateurs. But and then they have their own ideas about, who's doing the most cutting edge research. That's going to vary from person to person. But yeah, Stanford is certainly very much up there. As I say in the book, it doesn't have the same level of, pop culture recognition as Harvard, which is going to be, in all sorts of movies. I went to Harvard Law School, or even Harvard generally. But in terms of its concrete reputation, I think it's right up there.
Okay. And what were your expectations going into? So you entered Stanford Law second year. You did your first year of law school, University of Texas. So
that's right.
What were your expectations for your presumably 2-year experience at Stanford Law?
Well, I didn't necessarily have expectations, but I had a goal. And the perverse thing is that I actually realized the initial goal, or the initial stage of my goal, very effectively. As I explained, I had a great time in Texas. I learned a lot, but from the point of view of academic careers, Stanford and kindred places were optimal. So I went in there. I didn't really think about what to expect. I just thought this is what I need to do, and then I actually did pull it off with a fellowship. Afterwards, things went awry, of course, as I relate. But it was. I would say certainly there was, in terms of the law school itself, putting aside my research and my own ambitions, from the point of view of just experience, certainly. Texas was better in the sense that I was in the same cohort with everybody. Everybody was a first year, so I made friends. I had my group. By the time I arrived at Stanford, it was second year. People already knew each other, and you could work your way in to a certain extent, but it wasn't like that.
Let's fast forward.
It's Stanford. It's because of the fact that I transferred.
What was the genesis of your work on conservative victimology?
Well, it's I think it started, even though as I described my views as overall liberal, I certainly still had a visceral unease with it, because I do think that even though ultimately if it comes down to policies, I'm going to be liberal. It's certainly the case that liberalism sort of exiles and excommunicates aspects of human nature that are, for better or ill, natural.
Okay, so liberalism's excommunication of human nature, did that perhaps ill-prepare Sam Bankman-Fried for his FTX business? Right? Is Sam Bankman-Fried's failure with FTX and the spectacular meltdown, is this a negative reflection on liberalism, given that two of the premier exponents of liberalism are his parents, Stanford law professors Barbara Fried and Joe Bankman? So did their devotion to liberalism blind them to basics of human nature? Right? So liberalism believes that people are basically good, which is, I think, absolutely insane. And how on earth anyone could believe that human nature is basically good? And so did this blindness play a role in the FTX meltdown? Was their son morally crippled by being raised in this matrix of liberalism which has this delusional perspective that human nature is basically good.
And some people supersede. I don't want to say supersede because that implies a judgment, but I say suspend those to use a neutral term more effectively than others, and they become liberals. But it's not necessarily reasonable to expect that of everyone, and certainly liberal. Although in principles, liberals are compelled to recognize that how people are differently situated for a variety of cultural and biological and accidental reasons, and to think.
So conservatives believe in the importance of tradition, that tradition acts as a barrier against all sorts of things of which we're not even aware, and that when you break down these barriers, such as against same-sex marriage, you invite in all sorts of unknown pathologies and contagions. So trying to think of this 19th century British writer who talked about the closed gate. When a man finds a gate across his path, the liberal impulse is to just tear that gate down without asking, what's the purpose of the gate? Maybe the gate was there for a good reason. And so tradition has all sorts of gates and blocks on human behavior. And tradition is not based on first principles philosophy. It's not based on, because we believe X, therefore we're going to institute rituals A, B, C. Rather, the rituals and perspectives of tradition, evolved to meet very real human needs. And they evolved out of human nature and tried and true ways of organizing human community. While liberalism is kind of a top-down first principles ideology that claims not to be an ideology.
That anybody, could just, anybody who just had clean intentions or a good heart could sort of snap their fingers or would snap their fingers to adopt the liberal worldview. That was kind of facile to me, and at first that was just sort of a very visceral sense.
No, I'm trying to run a quality podcast here, guys. Stop the madness. You want to not someone stop the madness? I'm just trying to run a high quality podcast, and these boats go speeding by, huge splashing waves. My cheap Oppo phone isn't even waterproof. Stop the madness.
And I pursued the project in order to...
That was Sam Fried's FTX boat, man. Sam bloody Bankman-Fried just went by, and his FTX boat must have just sped by and sending these crazy waves up here. And I'm just an average bloke, right? I'm just a simple Jew hanging out here on the rocks, hanging out here on the dock of the bay. I got nothing better to do. Just hanging out on the dock of the bay, just whistling and singing a happy tune and discoursing about conservative theories of cultural oppression. No, I haven't been attacked by magpies yet. No, haven't experienced attacks. Right? Bloody hell! I'm trying to run a bloody podcast here, guys. And look at the madness. Like these crazy waves are placing my cheap Aussie phone in danger. That they're taking away from the high quality of my productions. Like if I'm known for anything, I'm known for high quality, high technical quality productions. And the madness of these waves, the splashing all over my bloody podcast, I think it's the liberal hegemony. They control not just the cultural means of productions, but they control the waves. They control the tide. And here I am sitting in the dock of the bay, just doing nothing. Bloody hell! Just trying to do, a very conventional podcast about conservative claims of cultural oppression and how Sam Bankman-Fried of this FTX fiasco, right? He is the son of these famous Stanford Law, right? He's the son of these famous Stanford Law graduates, right? And where did you hear about Joe Bankman, right? Where did you hear about Barbara Fried? You heard about them for the first time on my bloody show. Oh, I told you there was something rotten in Stanford law. I told you the problem was with our liberal system of thought control. The liberals control the means of production. Sam is one of the bad ones. Well, he's the child of these liberal Stanford professors who did our boy Rony Guldmann wrong. I've been telling you about Rony Guldmann's classic work, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression. I've been banging on about this for 6 months. If only people would have listened to me 6 months ago, they would have recognized the rottenness at the heart of this system that spawned the demon seed of Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX, and the tens of millions of dollars that he gave to Democratic candidates. And this Bay Area Mind the Gap political action committee that is steered by Barbara Fried, Joe Bankman, and other Stanford professors. I told you about the rottenness in the system. Like, I did everything I could. You heard about these people here first. I said, watch out, guys. There's something wrong with liberal hegemony. The libs control the cultural means of production. Tulsi Gabbard hosting Tucker right now. You went on vacation at a good time. I tried to warn you. I said, watch out, guys. There's rottenness here at Stanford Law. I told you about the Star Chamber at Stanford Law. How many times have I mentioned Rony Guldmann's name? Right? Hundreds of times on this show. How many times have I praised his book, Conservative Theories of Cultural Oppression? Right? I will not stop speaking the truth. I don't care if the waves and the tides here at Sydney Harbour try to get me. I don't care if they send, right? You think these are birds? These aren't birds, right? These are remote controlled, what do you call those things that fly about and drop bombs? Right? Those aren't real birds, mate. That's the liberal hegemony, owners of the cultural means of production, trying to shut down my bloody podcast because I'm getting too close to the truth. Right? They're trying to drown me out. They're trying to drown out the truth here. I told you there was something rotten in Denmark. All the billions of dollars that could have been saved if only people had paid attention to my show, to my blog post, lookforward.net, right, to all the blogs I've made about this book, about Star Chamber at Stanford Law School, with my interview with Rony Guldmann. And I'm not going to let them drown me. I'm going to keep speaking out until the last wave finally crushes me. But I'm determined to make my stand. Here I stand, guys. I can do no other. So help me God. Oppo phones versus the element. I bet that phone was 120. Yeah, that phone was 120 US, which is like 200 Australian. I bought it on my last trip. But we're not even counting the $40 that I spent for 80 gigs of data. Like, I really would like to give you the high quality technical experience of my iPhone with the Shure mic extender, right? That high quality visual and oral experience. But I can't because data is like 6 times as expensive if I do it through my American phone plan. So I'm just stuck here on my cheap Oppo phone, trying to warn you all about Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX meltdown. And this is the Rony Guldmann interview, which should have notified us that something was rotten here. I did this interview about 6 months ago.
Articulate it, and it was so visceral, in fact, that even a year into the fellowship, as I described, I'd only just begun succeeding in articulating.
Only just begun.
What are the skills that make for a good lawyer?
Well, certainly, this is underrated, but certainly a tolerance for tedium, and to sort of just be able to embrace, get this sense of, oh, I just finished the task. I wrote a letter to the judge complaining that the other side hasn't produced their.
So tedium, was it just too much tedium filling the FTX filings that lulled people to sleep, that this was all a scam? Now let's skip ahead here.
Doing even. Whoops.
Okay, this is
5-minute summary of your book, preferably without repeating points that we've already covered.
That is something I would have a very hard time doing, even though obviously I understand that listeners want to hear it. And the problem is this, and hopefully this will give them, some kind of indication. Okay, so what I can say generally, yeah, it is sort of a fall from grace. I was able to create sort of high hopes among the faculty there, but owing to my conflicts, I would say no, not with them personally as individuals, though it led to that too, but with the norms of academia that really.
So his principal conflicts were with the parents of Sam Bankman-Fried, meaning Stanford Law professors Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried. Cotto and Paul show, bitter at Bob's admit it, what if demographics had turned voters into gimme goodies type. So Paul Gottfried, he's about to make, or is he making his final show ever with Joseph Cotto? So what led to the dissolution of this winning pair, Joseph Cotto and Paul Gottfried? Why is this the end of Cotto-Gottfried? Inquiring minds need to know.
Progressively soured, though in very subtle ways that went unacknowledged at the time, and that eventually led to the conflagration, which I describe as my gaslighting. And the problem.
And who principally carried out this gaslighting? All right, there's principally his Stanford Law School professors. Yes, I've got my keeping George here in Sydney. Right, the conflagration and the gaslighting was principally done by two Stanford law professors, Barbara Fried and Joe Bankman, the parents of Sam Bankman-Fried. So Rony Guldmann says there's something rotten in the system. I picked up his book. I said, there's something rotten in the system. Bill, you want me to accept no more FTX donations? You want me to stop riding on the good ship FTX lollipop? You're really asking a lot, mate. But for the cause of truth, I'm willing to do it, mate. For the cause of truth. What a beautiful day here. It's about 70 degrees, overcast, sitting on the dock of the bay.
With any kind of summaries, sort of on the one hand, I can say, it's a lot of it is a critique of certain the intellectual norms of academia, which are in fact quite intellectually stifling and reflect a certain conservatism by the liberal elites, which is ultimately hypocritical given the demands that they impose on society. So if I were to say that, some people might find that it's somewhat interesting. Other people might find it banal. They say, we know there's a lot that's irrational about academia. Are you really telling us anything new? So if I put it that way, I'm not going to get that much reaction. Now, the other pole of what the memoir is about is the gaslighting. And as I, you said it sounds kind of incredible to you, because I'm saying that there was a form of communication, but solely through ambiguation and intimation and illusion that we had a form of communication that it was ultimately.
Okay, so was the same type of gaslighting done by FTX? Did Sam Bankman-Fried become excellent at gaslighting through the influence and example and teachings of his parents, Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried? Right? Was he born and raised and suckled on gaslighting, just like what Rony Guldmann here experienced during his time at Stanford Law from Sam Bankman-Fried's parents, Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried?
Subterranean and had to be decoded against this background, which all parties understood and knew. If I put it that way, it's going to sound either really weird or you're not going to, probably won't know what I'm talking about. If I say that the school website itself embodied.
So remember when there were blokes saying that that other financial scams were going on? What's the big one from 2008? That Bernie, right? Bernie had that multi-billion-dollar scam, and people have been warning about it for years. And like the SEC or the FTC had investigated, and Bernie Madoff, all right, he got away with it for years and years and years because he was just so good at gaslighting, right? And Sam Bankman-Fried got away with it because he was so good at gaslighting. And our liberal elite get away with things because they're just so good at gaslighting. And how did Jeffrey Epstein get away with it for so long? Because he was so good at gaslighting, and he had all these enablers on his side, just like Sam Bankman-Fried.
A message which was at the epicenter of this whole thing. Well, that's, if I just put it that way, it's going to sound crazy. So, but the only way to put...
Yeah, instead of calling him Sam Bankman-Fried, call him Robber Bankman. How did Robber Bankman get so good at robbing? Right? Did he hone his skills under the conscious or unconscious direction of his Stanford Law professor parents, Barbara Fried and Joe Bankman?
Those two aspects of it together and realize that the book is neither banal nor crazy is to read it. And so, of course, I'm asking, when I ask people to read it, I am asking them to undertake a certain leap of faith, and maybe this will help persuade them to do that.
Okay, if only other people had taken this leap of faith that I took 6 months ago, right? Thousands of lives could have been preserved in financial health. You wouldn't have this multi-billion-dollar meltdown of FTX. All right, we told you there was something rotten here.
But it is a leap of faith,
Yeah, and from my own experience, I've lived my life as a dissident and a heretic who's been thrown out of almost every community I've ever joined.
Yeah, I read about that.
And it is no fun. It's absolutely no fun whatsoever. And I can't overstate the toll of having people around you think you're crazy. That just took an enormous toll on me.
Right, and all the people who said Bernie Madoff is running a scam, right? They were told they were crazy. People who said that FTX was a scam, right? People told them that they were crazy. Rony Guldmann says that there's a Star Chamber going on at Stanford Law School. People said he was crazy. Rony Guldmann wrote this profound book, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression, and he was dismissed as crazy. I reached out to about 30 law professors who are mentioned in Rony Guldmann's book, The Star Chamber of Stanford Law School, and only about 2 responded to me. So the inference was, he's crazy, not worth responding to.
That practically drove me crazy. The more other people regarded me as crazy. I'm just curious about your experience.
Well, I totally agree with that. And in fact, if we talk about, let me add an addendum to what I earlier said about why I wrote the book, in a sense, because the book is it is a shield against that charge. Okay, you could say that, but I can say read the book. And if they say you're crazy, I can say, why exactly don't you accept argument A, B, C, and D? And I had one of my editors who was really great, but she was skeptical of the facially outlandish contentions. But then when I confronted her with specific arguments, it's not like she could refute them, but she just said, you have the ability to argue that the moon is made of green cheese. So yeah, you can make these arguments and I can't refute them, but I still don't believe you, which is fine. That I can deal. At least now I have a shield that I can say, look, do you really think a crazy person could write this on any conventional definition of crazy, a non-metaphorical definition of crazy? I always wanted to say, obviously not. And the book is, I hope, what establishes it.
Now, I can't overstate my...
Okay, Jim Bowden says, Luke, sorry for not getting back to you. Let's read Jim Bowden's message here. Currently too busy running matters after Christmas. Like to catch up with you looking at Anzac Bridge. You must be somewhere around Balmain. So I am currently about a mile and a half south of Sydney Harbour Bridge. So I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, all right, and explaining that Sam Bankman-Fried, robber man, right, the operator of FTX, this multi-billion-dollar crypto scam. Right, his parents are two notable Stanford law professors, Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried, who I started talking about 6 months ago when I read Rony Guldmann's book here on the Stanford Law Star Chamber. His two principal advisors were Barbara Fried and her husband Joe Bankman. So Rony wrote Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression. He twigged there was something rotten here.
Desire to sit at the cool kids table. Like, I love the cool kids. I love the successful. I mean, I love that stuff. I really, 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 really want to belong to the cool kids. There's only one thing in the world that I want more, and that is to pursue what I think is true and to say what I think is true. Yeah. I'm just curious, do you also have a significant, through the nose against the glass, kind of looking in at the cool kids table, desire, or has that become muted in you?
Look, in a sense, I certainly I have those thoughts sometimes because I think, okay, I've got a good paying job.
That's
I'm fine. I'm not working at Starbucks. I'm not picking up the garbage. But I certainly see that a lot of former law students my age or even significantly younger, certainly from Stanford, are certainly further ahead in their careers than I am. They're partners at firms as opposed to a senior associate. They're partners at firms where they're really making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. I look back. I said, why am I not there? I had the same degree. I had the right grades. I can if we're in court and they write a motion to dismiss, I can defeat them. So I can stand toe to toe to them. So, but why am I not sitting at the cool kids?
Yeah. So success, economic success, social success, success with women, isn't necessarily primarily based upon merit, upon intelligence, upon wisdom, upon righteousness. It's primarily based on how well you get along with people, what your people skills are like, how well you live in community, in addition to merit. Now, there are some things where it's all merit. So if you're going to be a winning chess champion, that's all merit. You're going to be a great physicist or economist or biologist, all right, that's going to be overwhelmingly merit. Bloody hell, I'm trying to run a high quality podcast here. Stop the madness. Stop the waves. Tide, go away. I'm trying to break important intellectual ground here, but the liberal hegemonists are sending these waves and birds at me to try to shut me down. But I will not be silent. I'm going to speak truth to power.
Table, but I try to say, in the end, you got to embrace your faith. You try to, walk those two worlds between, establishing a palatable place in society, but also pursuing your heart's passion, which is the book. And I've tried to effect a compromise between those two as best I could because I didn't really have a choice in the matter.
Now, I'm thinking off the top of my head, so for the normie who's watching this and thinking, okay, is there a larger point here other than this individual's guy's, fight for his reputation? One way that I would summarize the larger point is that the Western world is largely run by a liberal left consensus, and this liberal left consensus is as flawed and deserving of critique as any other attempt at a worldview. That would be one way I would summarize your scholarship. Is that fair?
Yeah, it certainly does because at the end of the day, even if it's more true than other worldviews, it certainly doesn't have a monopoly on truth. And given its prestige, and given the subtlety.
And this is the great point of Rony Guldmann's book. The liberal left worldview that dominates most of our institutions is not presented as just another partisan worldview. It's presented as something that transcends worldviews, that transcends ideologies. It's just pragmatism and kindness and freedom and love. All right, it's just about pursuing, what is empirically true. It's not another partisan system operating for the advantage of a select few, when in truth it is just another partisan system based upon a particular faith commitment about human nature, that the self is buffered, is basically good, is strategic, autonomous, capable of being rationally directed, and overcoming its basic drives through the force of reason, as opposed to the traditional sense of self, which is porous, meaning that what happens outside of me affects me, what goes on with you affects me, and that we need tradition to bar the door to all sorts of things that we can't articulate or don't even know.
Of its prejudices, because there is a lot of truth there too, but it's also false in, let's say, in certain subtle ways. Like when I discussed transgenderism, just as one example, it certainly merits critiques, and I kind of always felt like in law school you've got lots of people who are like they're writing articles defending certain international human rights norms, right to abortion, various demands for various kinds of equality. And I always felt, it's not that I opposed that necessarily, but I felt that they were reaching for the low-hanging fruit. The higher hanging fruit is the elites, the people who have the cultural power, the might of Stanford, as I describe it. That always had a greater allure to me. That was a certain kind of hubris, perhaps, and it led to the tumult I describe. But I have, again, maybe it comes back to this primordial rebelliousness. I can say it doesn't matter, even if you have 75% of the truth or whatnot. I'm not going to rest on my laurels.
Okay, so to be continued. This is a great story, and we'll do a lot more on this later on, but I'm off to continue my walkabout. Bye-bye.